Hello students, myself Dr. Sucharita Bhattacharya once again welcoming you all in my lecture series on classical optics for physics 1. The series I am delivering you all know is for first semester BTech course and the streams under considerations are computer science and engineering, information technology and food technology. Today I am starting the lecture 5. Now, you all know that we are now in module 2 of classical optics, and in the last session, we have completed the submodule 2.01 on interference of light. So today we will start the submodule 2.02 on diffraction of light in continuation with interference. Here we will cover Fresnel and Fraunhofer class of diffraction, Fraunhofer diffraction of a single slit, multiple slits, intensity distributions, missing order, Rayleigh criterion without deduction, and resolving power of grating and microscope, and their applications in related numerical problems. Now, the total number of lectures to be covered here is 5. Now, today I am starting with the first lecture. So, today's lesson plan will include the phenomenon of diffraction, the Fresnel and Fraunhofer classification, Fraunhofer diffraction due to a single slit, and intensity distribution. Naturally, the questions to be addressed are as follows. First, obviously, is what is diffraction? Next one is the explanation of diffraction with wave theory. Then we will go for its classification. Next, we will consider the Fraunhofer single slit diffraction and its intensity expression. Next, what about principal maximum and minima from intensity expression? Then we will go for subsidiary or secondary maxima. And finally, we will consider the intensity distribution graph. Okay, so let us start. Now, when light passes across a sharp aperture or opaque obstacle, it is always found that some light encroaches within the geometrical shadow region, as if light bends round the corner of the opaque obstacle, causing spreading out of some light mainly across the boundary of the shadow. This effect of bending of light around the sharp corner of an opaque obstacle is termed as diffraction phenomenon. Here it is very clear that rectilinear propagation of light is failed to explain it. Fresnel, for the first time, explained the happening with the help of Huygens principle. Now, before going to the Fresnel's explanation, let us first take a look what about the bending. Okay, so for that purpose, we are considering this figure where S is a point source through which light is falling, and here we have AB in the form of AB, an opaque obstacle, and this is the screen EF. Now, from this point source, when light will come and it will fall on the opaque obstacle, if light travels in straight line, that means if there is rectilinear propagation of light, you will expect a sharp shadow in the region between M and N, because light will travel in straight line and this is the boundary of the opaque obstacle. So you will expect to have the shadow in the region N to N. But if you observe this shadow very carefully, to your surprise, you will find that some region around M, that means below and above, and in some region around N, also in below and above, you will find some illumination in the form of dark and bright fringes in both cases. I am repeating, if you observe the shadow region between M and N very carefully, you will find that in some region around M and in some region around N, you will find some illumination as if light enters by bending around this sharp edge of the obstacle, creating the fringe-like pattern between the maximum and the minimum here also. That means light and the dark portion. Okay. This effect is termed as the diffraction. And since this is happening only at the boundary of the shadow region, that's why it appears as if light bends round the sharp corner of opaque obstacle and encroaching within the geometrical shadow by spreading it to some extent, and this type of phenomenon is observed. So that is the diffraction phenomenon. That means here people will find difficulty to define the sharp edge of the shadow. Now, using rectilinear propagation of light, this cannot be explained, already you understood. Let us now come to the fact that how the happening is understood with the help of Huygens principle. According to this principle, actually in the last lecture, we have done Huygens principle in very detail. So according to this principle, we have seen all the points on a progressing wavefront act as sources of secondary wavelets, the envelope of which gives the new position of the wavefront. That means if you consider this is the wavefront, each and every point on the plane of the wavefront will be considered as sources of secondary spherical wavelets, and the envelope, if you consider them like these spherical wavelets. Now, if you draw the envelope, what you will find? The position and shape of the next wavefront. That means when a spherical wavefront emitted by a source arrives at the obstacle, all points on the wavefront give rise to secondary wavelets. Now, following Huygens construction, it is seen that some secondary wavelets near the sharp corner of the obstacle penetrate into the geometrical shadow and causes illumination to some extent across both ends of the boundary, which cannot be sharply defined. Now, these type of wavefronts, when occupy the plane of the obstacle or any aperture, it is found that some portion of this, following Huygens construction, that some portion of this secondary wavefront or wavelet will penetrate into the geometrical shadow region, because these are mostly spherical. So some portion of the sphere will penetrate within this geometrical shadow region, mainly across the boundary, because the portion of the wavefront just behind the opaque obstacle will be obstructed. But at the two ends, some wavefronts will pass beyond the obstacle and enter into this geometrical shadow, and it will continue its movement following Huygens construction, and ultimately they will reach at the two sharp edges of the shadow region, that means at M and at N, giving some fluctuations in the shadow region only across the boundary. That's why the shadow region cannot be sharply defined. So, following Huygens construction, we can very easily explain the phenomenon of diffraction. But here you have to take care of one thing, that your opaque obstacle or the sharp aperture, the dimension must be of the order of wavelength of the visible light. Otherwise, diffraction will not take place and you cannot explain in this manner. Okay. Now let us come to the classification of the diffraction. Diffraction phenomenon is divided into two classes. One is the Fresnel class. Here the source of light and the screen are in general placed at a finite distance from the diffracting aperture. Naturally, the incident wavefront is either spherical or cylindrical. Here no lenses are used. Let us take a look. This is a point source, the spherical wavefront in the form of secondary wavelets you are getting. You can draw the envelope and you are getting the enveloping wavefront is moving in the forward direction. Now, sorry, when it reaches at the opaque obstacle or the diffraction aperture, naturally from the sharp edge, it will pass beyond it and you will find the intensity distribution on the screen. Now look here. With respect to the diffraction aperture or opaque obstacle, the distance of the source and the screen are at finite distance. Naturally, the incident wavefronts are either spherical or cylindrical, means a little bit line source if it is. Here, no lenses are used at any of the stages. So this is with Fresnel class. But in case of Fraunhofer class, what is happening? Here, the source and the screen are at infinite distance from the diffraction aperture, which is easily achieved by placing the source on the focal plane of a convex lens and by placing the screen on the focal plane of another convex lens. So two lenses effectively remove the source and screen to infinity. Naturally, the wavefront here is incident on the aperture and obstacle in the plane form. Okay. Now let us take a look. So we have just like this a point source here, say. Now here, if you place a lens in the focus of which the point source is kept, naturally the plane waves will come out in the form of the wave front. Parallel beam of light will come out in the form of plane wave front, which will fall on the diffraction aperture. Now here a second lens is kept, in the focus of which the screen is placed. Naturally, the diffracted beam, when passes through the lens, it will converge those parallel beam of light or the plane wave front into the screen, forming the intensity distribution. That means the two lenses, here on the left one, here on the right one, effectively remove the source and the screen to infinity. Naturally, the incident wavefront is plane, and here we are using the lenses. Okay, so you got the 3 points of differences between the two classes. Here, finite distance from diffraction aperture to source and the screen. Here, effectively infinite distance from diffraction aperture to source and the screen. Here, no lenses are used. Here, with the help of two lenses, we make this arrangement. Here, the incident wavefront is spherical or cylindrical. Here, incident wavefront is plane. Okay. Now, as per our syllabus, we will now start discussing on Fraunhofer diffraction due to single slit. For that purpose, let us consider a slit of width small e. This is a single slit of width small e on which light from a distant source, that means from infinity, with the help of that lens arrangement, is falling normally from the left. That means corresponding wavefront is plane wavefront, which is falling normally on this. Now, diffracted light is focused by a convex lens placed in the focal plane of the focusing lens. Here, the screen is kept. Diffracted light is focused by a convex lens, which is focused on a screen placed in the focal plane of the focusing lens. Now, according to Huygens Fresnel principle, every point of the wavefront in the plane of the slit becomes the origin of secondary wavelets and spread out to the right in all possible directions. So this is the plane wavefront. When it occupies the plane of the slit, according to Huygens Fresnel principle, every point on this plane of the slit will be the wavefront will be considered as sources of secondary spherical wavefront or wavelet, which are radiated out to the right in all possible directions. So here we are considering out of these all possible directions two sets. One set of beams which are coming out normal to the slits and converging at some point P on the screen. And other set of beams we are considering which are coming out by making an angle theta to the normal and converging at some point P prime on the screen. We will try to find out the intensity at P prime, and in that intensity expression, if you put theta equal to 0, you will get the intensity at P also. Very, very important one. Okay. So, to find out the intensity at P prime, what to do? From this point A, let us drop a perpendicular on BR, which makes the same angle theta as per geometrical construction. So A and B is representing the width of the slit. That means the diffraction aperture. So the wavefronts which are coming out, or the secondary wavelets which are coming out, they are representing the two extreme ends of the set of beams after being diffracted. Clear? Now, in order to find out the path difference, already I mentioned, we will drop a normal on BR at some point. Okay. So, what about the corresponding path difference from this plane onwards? From this plane onwards, the paths are same. So, to reach this plane, what about the path difference? That is BC. The path difference between the two extreme diffracted beams to reach the point P prime at an angle theta to the normal is given by BC. Now, what about BC? BC equal to AB sine theta. Now AB equal to E, so BC equal to E sine theta. So the corresponding phase difference is 2 pi by lambda into BC. You know the relationship. So 2 pi by lambda into BC. Now what about BC? BC equal to E sine theta. So listen it very carefully. The total phase difference between the diffracted waves from two extreme edges of the diffraction aperture to reach the point P prime on the screen at an angle theta to the normal is given by 2 pi by lambda into E sine theta, where lambda is the wavelength of the monochromatic light you are using for the in the form of incident beam to be diffracted, and E is the width of the slit and theta is the angle of diffraction already we mentioned. Now, let us consider theoretically as if the entire width E of the slit is divided into large number n of equal parts so that the amplitude of the wave coming from each part is small a, because width of each part is same. Now, let us take a look. Theoretically, we are considering the total width of the slit is divided into large number of small parts, say n number of small parts, okay? So that the amplitude of the wave coming out from each part is same, because you are equally dividing it. Mind it, theoretical consideration. And the amplitude of the waves coming out from each small subpart of this slit width is small a, okay? So, total phase difference between the waves coming from any two consecutive parts of the slit, what will be the relationship? 1 by n into 2 pi by lambda into E sine theta. Because the entire, considering entire width of the slit, total phase difference, we got 2 pi by lambda into E sine theta. Now we are considering theoretically the entire width of the slit is divided into n equal parts, so that the phase difference between the waves coming from any two consecutive parts of the slit, that is given by 1 by n into 2 pi by lambda into E sine theta, say delta. Thus, our problem reduces to the calculation of the resultant disturbance at P prime due to the superposition of n number of waves of same amplitude A, same period, with phase increasing in an AP series or with a common phase difference of value delta. I am repeating, very interesting one. Our problem reduces to the calculation of resultant disturbances at P prime due to the superposition of n waves, because you are considering the entire width is divided into n equal parts. Naturally, out of each part, you may consider that n number of waves are coming out of same amplitude A, same period, because you have taken wavelength to be same with phases increasing in an AP series. That means common phase difference. Between two consecutive parts, it is delta. Between first to third part, it is 2 delta. Between first to fourth one, it is 3 delta, and so on. Accordingly, the expression for the resultant amplitude at P prime is, this is the standard one for such type of problems. Okay. The resultant amplitude at P prime is given by A sine n delta by 2 by sine delta by 2. Actually, this is the standard expression for the resultant of n waves of same amplitude A and having a common phase difference of delta. It is given by A sine n delta by 2 by sine delta by 2. Now let us take a look. A sine A remains here. Now n delta by 2. What about n delta by 2 in our case? It is pi by lambda into E sine theta divided by sine of delta by 2. Delta by 2, take a look, pi by n lambda into E sine theta. So the expression in our case changes to A into sine pi by lambda into E sine theta divided by sine pi by n lambda into E sine theta. Now, how to simplify it? Pi by lambda into E sine theta, it is a common factor in both the numerator and the denominator. So let us consider it by a single parameter, say alpha. That means we are designating pi by lambda into E sine theta as alpha. So this expression reduces to A sine alpha by sine alpha by n. Resultant amplitude at P prime due to the superposition of n waves of same amplitude A, same period, and with the same phase difference is given by A sine alpha by sine alpha by n, where alpha equal to pi sine theta by lambda. Now it can be written as A into sine alpha by n, because n is very large. N is very, very large. Naturally, what about alpha by n? It is very, very small, and you know sine on small angle reduces to the angle itself. So R equal to A sine alpha by n. Okay, as n is very large. So finally, the resultant amplitude at P prime due to superposition of n vibrations. Now look it very carefully. It is n vibration means effectively these are secondary wavelets coming from the single slit. That means superposition of secondary wavelets out of the single wave front coming from the single slit. This is the diffraction, very, very important. So finally, resultant amplitude at P prime due to superposition of n vibrations, that is secondary wavelets coming out from single slit, is given by R equal to Na. This n we are taking up Na sine alpha by alpha. Na sine alpha by alpha means A sine alpha by alpha. That means A is the total amplitude. A is the total amplitude which you are getting because Na, the incident amplitude, you can say this is Na, that is represented by capital A sine alpha by alpha. And what about R? The resultant amplitude at P prime. Now take a look. Ideally, you can consider n tending to infinity, up to n tending to infinity. That means theoretically infinite number of divisions, so that the amplitude coming out of each part is infinitesimally small. That means A tending to 0. But what about Na? Na obviously finite. So in our expression, since Na is appearing, that's why we are checking the limit. It is becoming finite. Now physically, what does it represent? N tending to infinity means the separation between consecutive parts of the slit, which you consider to be theoretically divided, is infinitesimally small. So, in the limit n tending to infinity, you are actually left with a single slit of width E, and the amplitude of the wave coming out from the total is Na. Okay. So, nothing is happening. Only to use this standard formula, we have taken theoretical consideration, and ultimate limit we have checked whether it is mathematically viable or not. Clear? So resultant intensity at P prime, you all know that is I proportional to R square. That means K into R square. That means K into A square sine alpha by alpha whole square, where K is the constant of proportionality. Now, this K square is nothing but I0. K A square is nothing but I0, where I0 is the intensity at the point P, just directly opposite to the slit, which we are going to check right now. I am repeating, resultant intensity at P prime is the square of amplitude's proportionality constant K. We are getting I equal to I0 sine square alpha by alpha square, where I0 is considered to be the intensity at P, which is just directly opposite to the slit. That means theta equal to 0 here. Now, let us check it. What about principal maximum and minima? Resultant amplitude at P prime is R equal to A sine alpha by alpha. To have maximum out of this factor must be maximum, that is 1. Okay, because this is the constant one, the incident amplitude. Now, how to make it 1? There is a very common mathematical limit that sine alpha by alpha in the limit alpha tends to 0 gives us 1. Okay, that means if you consider here this limit, you will get 1 from here. So, maximum value of resultant amplitude is R max equal to A, and maximum intensity is I max equal to I0 equal to K square. Clear? Now look, these are obtained at where you will obtain it alpha equal to theta equal to 0, because in the limit you have taken alpha tends to 0. Now what about alpha? Pi e sine theta by lambda, we already found out. Now other than theta, everything is constant there. Pi is constant, e is constant, lambda is constant. So alpha equal to theta equal to 0 is the limit where you are getting this maximum intensity. Now theta equal to 0 means you are talking about the point P, which is formed, that means this maximum is formed by the secondary wavelets traveling normally to the slit. That means directly opposite to the slit, and is termed as principal maximum. Okay. So I am repeating, where to get principal maximum? By putting alpha equal to theta equal to 0, you will get principal maximum at the point P, which is formed by secondary wavelets traveling normally to the slit, and this is termed as principal maximum. Okay, this is 1. That's why principal maximum. Now what about minima? To have the minima out of this factor, you need the numerator to be minimum. The numerator to be minimum in the form of sine alpha equal to 0. So to have the resultant amplitude to be minimum, we need sine alpha to be 0. Now for which values of alpha it will satisfy? Plus minus m pi. What about m? M is the order of the minima. And what should be the values of m? 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Giving you first order, second order, third order minima on either side of principal maximum. Okay. Now, what about alpha? Pi by lambda into e sine theta, that is equal to plus minus m pi. So pi will cancel out from both sides, and we will have e sine theta equal to plus minus m lambda. So this is the condition of minima in terms of the path difference. And this is the condition of minima in terms of the root of the equation. Okay. This is the condition of minima in terms of path difference, which expresses the condition that the rays diffracted at an angle theta interfere destructively if the path difference between the extreme diffracted rays is an integral multiple of lambda, because it is nothing but the interference between secondary wavelets. This is the condition of minimum, and this is the path difference we already found out in case of the single slit in the, so few minutes ago we have done it. So we are getting it, and it expresses the condition that rays diffracted at an angle theta interfere destructively if the path difference between the extreme diffracted rays, because from A and B we considered, is an integral multiple of lambda. Here M is the order of definitely the diffraction. Mind it, the value M is not acceptable, because if you put M equal to 0, then theta will be 0, and theta 0 means you are getting back the condition of principal maximum. That's why M equal to 0 is not acceptable here, as theta equal to 0. And obviously theta equal to 0 corresponds to principal maximum. Okay. Now, in addition to principal maximum at alpha equal to theta equal to 0, we will have to search for weak subsidiary or secondary maxima between equally spaced minima, because number of minima you got plus minus 1, plus minus 2, plus minus 3. So on both sides, large numbers. Now, what about the maximum? Only one. That means you have to search for some subsidiary maxima in between the equally spaced minima. How to do that? Obtain the position using the rule of calculus. That is a simple one. dd alpha of I equal to 0. This is the I expression. If you do the derivative with respect to the variable alpha, what you will find? 2I0 sine alpha by alpha. Then take the derivative of this factor. What you will get? Alpha cos alpha minus sine alpha by alpha square equal to 0. That means here you are getting two factors product to give you 0. Either sine alpha equal to 0. Okay. Now sine alpha equal to 0 is the condition of minima. A few minutes back we got it. So this can never be the condition for subsidiary maxima. Then what about the second option? That is alpha cos alpha minus sine alpha equal to 0. Definitely it should be the condition for secondary or subsidiary maxima. If you just simplify it, what you will find? Alpha equal to tan alpha. So alpha equal to tan alpha is the condition of secondary maxima. Clear? Now, how to solve this one? Just take a look. The variable is occurring on both sides. This type of problems are normally solved graphically by plotting, say, y equal to alpha on along x, and by plotting y equal to tan alpha. Actually, not along x or not along y. It is better to say that y equal to alpha and y equal to tan alpha we will plot on the same graph. Okay, y is along y direction and alpha is along x direction. Now when you are plotting y equal to alpha and y equal to tan alpha on the same graph, you will get the point of intersection from where you can find out the root of the equation. So with this graph, I think you are familiar from 12th standard. Still I am recapitulating. Just take a look. Here we have taken two set of graphs. This is y equal to alpha, the straight line passing through origin and inclined at an angle of 45 degrees, because it is y equal to mx. Now what about y equal to tan alpha? These are family of curves. These are family of curves. Now very important behavior of tan function is near plus minus odd multiple of pi by 2, because tan value then infinity. But infinity can never be a fixed point. So we have to consider this factor that it is approaching towards this infinite line in all case, but never meet. Okay. So this is y equal to alpha and these are y equal to tan alpha graphs. So they are intersection. Just take a look. First intersection you are getting at the origin, which give you the position of principal maximum at alpha equal to 0. What about other intersection? Just take a look. Nearly 3 pi by 2. Nearly 5 pi by 2. Similarly, this side minus 3 pi by 2 minus 5 pi by 2. So, the values of alpha which satisfy this equation are obtained graphically as alpha nearly equal to 3 pi by 2, 5 pi by 2, 7 pi by 2. exactly 1.43 pi, 2.46 pi, 3.47 pi, and so on. That means the values of alpha approaching these values give you the position of first secondary maximum, second secondary maximum, and third secondary maximum on both sides of the central line. Okay, because of infinite behavior of the tan function. Now, why we are considering them as subsidiary or secondary maxima? Just take a look. What about the intensity at the position of principal maximum at alpha equal to 0? We got it as I equal to I0. Okay. Now, we have already seen that this is the expression for I equal to I0 sine square alpha by alpha square. So, I at first secondary maximum. What about the intensity? I0 sine alpha. What about alpha? First secondary maximum, 3 pi by 2 by 3 pi by 2 whole square. You are getting 4 by 9 pi square into I0. That is I0 by 22, which is only 4.5% of I0. Definitely it is secondary maximum, and this is the first secondary maxima. Ma means plus minus both sides. What about I2S? I secondary maximum for the second one. I0 again sine alpha by alpha whole square. What about alpha value? Sine 5 pi by 2 by 5 pi by 2 whole square. It is even smaller because 4 by 25 pi square we are getting here. So it is I0 by 62. This is coming out as 1.6% of I0. Even smaller than first secondary maximum. This is called second secondary maxima. Naturally, you can say that most of the incident light is concentrated at the position of principal maximum. Most of the incident light is concentrated at the position of principal maximum, and others are drastically reduces, giving you the secondary maximum. Okay. Now let us come to the intensity distribution graph. Here, single slit intensity distribution is showing graphically by plotting I along Y and alpha along X. Okay. The pattern, just take a look, the special characteristics of the pattern. The pattern consists of a central principal maximum occurring in the direction of the incident rays at alpha equal to 0. That means directly opposite to the slit in our diagram at P. So this is the position of principal maximum. Okay. There are subsidiary maxima of decreasing intensity on either side of it at positions of alpha equal to nearly 3 pi by 2, 5 pi by 2, 7 pi by 2 plus minus. So these are the position of the subsidiary or secondary maxima. Just take a look. This is first secondary maxima, which is 4.5% of this. This is second secondary maxima, 1.6% of this. Similarly, this side. Naturally, nobody will measure that whether it is 4.5% or 1.6% of this, but definitely figure-wise you have to give that impression. So these are first secondary maximum I1S, these are second secondary maxima I2S. Between subsidiary maxima, there are minima at positions of plus minus pi, plus minus 2 pi, plus minus 3 pi, because we got alpha equal to plus minus m pi. So it is plus minus pi. First minima, this is plus minus 2 pi. Second minima, these are plus minus 3 pi. That means the third minima. Here, about one thing we have to be careful, that subsidiary maxima do not fall exactly midway between the two minima, but displace slightly towards the center of the pattern, and displacement decreases as the order of maxima increases. Because you know exactly alpha value is 1.43 pi. Naturally, this peak point will be a little bit tilted towards the central maximum. You just check it. It is a little bit tilted. Similarly here, this is the peak point. These are not exactly midway, a little bit tilted towards the central maximum, because exact values are 1.43 pi, not 3 pi by 2, nearly 3 pi by 2. So So you have to be careful during the diagram taking. Okay. So I think all of you are understanding all the different characteristics of single slit diffraction, which I tried to discuss in very detail, and you got finally the idea that single slit diffraction is nothing but the superposition or interference between the secondary wavelets coming from a single wave front, whereas interference is a two wave front phenomenon. Okay, so thank you, students, for your cooperation. I hope you have enjoyed it. Stay safe and stay healthy. Okay, bye.